Hey y'all, so today's video is all about EQing, panning, and then adjusting stuff in the stereo field. That's pretty much just making it more mono, more stereo. But I've already recorded this whole video, but I didn't like how it came out, so everything's already done. So I'm just going to explain to you why I did stuff instead of showing you, because I feel like with the EQ, what happened to me was that I watched tutorials on how to do it, and I thought that was like what I should do for every single sound, or like every single melody, every time. But that's definitely not the case. EQ is always going to be per sound, per track, per beat. It's always going to be different, and it's always going to be a little bit of a, not really a challenge, but a little bit of a game to figure out how to EQ a track, sound, beat the right way. So I'm just going to show you what I like to do. I like to do it in mono, because when it's in mono, you hear everything pretty much squished together. All the sounds are together, so you can hear clashing better. And then if you EQ in mono, when you bring out the stereo, you can adjust in stereo if you need to, but it should make it sound a lot cleaner because you're hearing all the sounds right in the middle. So what I like to do, same thing as in the first video, which if you haven't seen it, it's in the link, of course. It's also in the playlist. I think it's called Mixing and Mastering or Mixing Walkthrough, the playlist. But same thing, I like to take a section of the song where all the sounds are, and if they're not all there, I'll take them and bring them over. So let me find it. Here, this 808, we need it over. And then same thing as last time, tags to do after, and then any kind of like add-ons, like this little, that right there, I'll do that after too, because it's not always in the song, or always in the beat. And then also this little part right here, which, if you haven't heard this part of the song, pretty nice, but so that part I'll also do by itself later, and I'll do it in this section of the song, just because that's towards the end, and that's how I like to do it. It might not make sense to you, but I like to do it by, if it's used a lot, and where it is in the beat. So let's go back to the section that we highlighted before, right here. Now I'm just going to take and mute that 808 so I don't have two 808s going at the same time. And now with EQ, you want to do it while you hear the rest of the song, or like the rest of the, what's it called? The rest of the beat. You want to hear it with the rest of the sounds. That way you don't EQ too much, too less, and you can hear if there's anything clashing in the other parts of the beat, song, whatever. But it's going to sound a bit weird for some of these because, like I said, I already mixed them. So I'm going to try to take out the parts that might make it sound a bit different. That we'll do later. And then I'm going to just take off these EQs. So going back to the beat, what we're going to do is listen to each part, or not listen to each part. We're going to select each sound, go into the EQ. I'm trying to use stock plugins for the whole mixing tutorial, so I'm going to use Fruity Parametric EQ2 because it's stock with FL. If you're using Ableton Logic, your stock EQ is probably just as well as this one, so you can follow along. But here's what I did to this one. I took out the low end, and taking out the low end is going to help the 808, the lower parts of like a snare, because the snare clap has some like mids. This is going to take all the extra little out of the melody, and it's going to open it up for the 808 and the other kind of low mids bass. So that's what I did with that. And then with these little like peaks that you see going down, that's because there's a sharp sound. Here, I'll show you. So here it is. So you can hear the low end there. And then if the low end's gone. But here, watch. Here's what I mean by the peak. So it feels like kind of like boxy. Any kind of frequency that sounds a bit off to you, you want to take out. So what I like to do is I like to select it very, very finely, like a point. And then, sorry, I missed it. Just got a text. But I like to select it like a point, and then bring it down so that only that frequency is being taken out. And you can, if you've been EQing for a bit, you can hear it right now. And about right there, I don't hear it anymore. This is the thing with EQ, there's really no science to it. And just like with mixing, there's really no way to do it. There's just some guidelines that you should follow, but you can always break guidelines, you can always break rules. So same thing with this one right here. Let me just show you what it sounds like. Very sharp, kind of shrill sound. So same thing, I'm going to select that very finely, and then I'm going to bring that down until I don't hear it anymore. And then right here, I boosted it in the high mids, and then like the very high frequencies, and that's just to brighten it up. So as you can tell, that kind of dimmed it down a bit, but bring it back, it sounds a bit brighter. You can do that, but that's kind of overkill, to me at least. Let's get back down to somewhat normal. So that's what I did for the melody. I mean, like I said, you shouldn't follow exactly what I did, because every melody is going to be different. But a good rule of thumb would be to take out the low ends. And if, like, the way that you can tell if you take out too much low end is here, I'll show you. So as you can hear, that's pretty full, you can say, pretty low and heavy. The way that you know you took out too much low ends, when it starts sounding like tinny, and like that, that's like tinny. So what I like to do is I like to go until I feel like, this is like going way up, but I like to go until I feel like I've taken out too much. It sounds tinny like right here, and I back off a bit. So with this, I could actually get away with 101, but I was at 87. That's what you want to do. You just want to bring it up through the low end, like sweep, pretty much. Sweep up, scrub up, whatever you want to call it, until it sounds a bit too tinny, and you want to back off. Just enough. Like, you don't want to be like up here, then back off to here. Like, if you're up here, you think that sounds good, then you bring it back a little bit. And you don't want to do a very sharp cut off like this, like a very steep one, because then you have no roll off at all. So it just sounds, it's just instant, like boom, nothing there. And by the way, that's enter on the keyboard to make it full screen. But like I said, you don't want it to be very steep cut off, because then you don't have any low end at all coming through. So I usually just keep it right here at a 2. And see, you have different ones too, different kind of roll-offs. And the way they get to that is if you right-click each knob, EQ frequency knob, you go to order, and you go in between the different ones. You can also go to type here, and you could get your different kinds of shells, high passes, stuff like that. I'm not too sure what key is. I've never had to mess with that. I've never tried messing with it, but you also have that option too. So let me get this back to 87, I think it was. And then after you do all this, you're going to notice that your volume, your output, is either going to go up or down. So this, before EQ, is at, let's see, peaking at pretty much -15. If you put the EQ on, see how it's a little bit lower, it's peaking sometimes up there. If you know where your volume is, say your volume was at -18 when you mixed it before you leveled it, and you put the EQ on it, and say now it's at like -21. That means that you lost 3 dB. So what you want to do, sometimes in your EQ you'll have this little slider right here, and all that's doing is something called gain staging. Gain staging is when you pretty much, it's like makeup gain. So if you take away 3 and you liked how it sounded before at 3, not 3, like I said before, if it's at -18 when you leveled it and it went to -21 after you EQ'd it, you want to gain stage it up 3. So it's back to what it used to be. Because if you don't, then you'll have this sound lower than it was before, and then your whole mix will be thrown off. So gain staging, sometimes you'll have this little knob here, sometimes you won't, but there's always going to be some kind of way to gain stage. You don't want to turn up the volume fader, if you can't get a gain plugin. I'm pretty sure FL has a stock gain plugin. If I can find it. I thought there was a gain plugin, but maybe I'm just not seeing it. But yeah, you always want a gain stage, so you want to make sure that you bring it back to what it used to be. Now, like I said, you don't want to EQ solo, and you don't want to EQ in stereo. You can, but I like to do it in mono. So just to show you what that sounds like, here it is in mono, and then stereo. Here's the melody in stereo without the EQ. And then here it is with EQ. See, there's like enough low end where it's not empty and tinny, but there's not too much that's going to be overpowering the 808 and fighting for that kind of space. So that's why I like to do it in mono, because you can actually hear all the sounds together. So let's bring back to mono. And you want to do the same thing with the rest of the sounds. I'm not going to go through every single sound because it's pretty up to you on how you go to EQ. And I know it's kind of like throwing you out there to like do it yourself. It's pretty much what I'm telling you to do. But it's really all you have to do. You just have to keep practicing with EQ. EQ is just like leveling. It's always going to be different for every beat. And it only becomes easier through experience. And then you'll get you on the tricks that you like to do. But let's bring in all the rest of the sounds. Now let's say we took off the EQ for this right here. Let's say we took off the low end EQ. And let's bring it back in. So it's very subtle, but very subtle with the low end coming back in, making it a lot easier for this 808 to punch through. But it is worth it. All the little small details really do matter in music, especially with mixing, EQing, all that. So like I said, I'm not going to go through all of them, but some things with EQ, don't be afraid to cut out a lot of low end if you need to. Don't be afraid to boost high end a lot if you need to. Say like you want this clap to be like very, very bright. You can just fucking go for it. Like, I was, it depends, but you know what I mean. Don't be afraid of bringing this knob up, but at the same time, don't forget about your gain. You don't want your gain to be spiking up because of this one frequency being boosted a lot. But don't be afraid to mess with EQ a bit. There's really no science to it, but like I said, try not to overthink it and try not to underthink it, because EQ does really matter if you want your beats to sound a lot better. Let me get this back to what it used to be. I forget where it was at. Alright, there we go. But yeah, don't be afraid to boost it up if you need a brighter, like, clap, snare, anything like that. Don't be afraid to cut out a lot. Say like there's way too much mid. Don't be afraid to take that out. And the same thing with like before, like in the melody, with these very sharp sounds. Don't be afraid to like take them out by quite a bit, because you want them to be out. You don't want them to be in the listener's ears. You might not be hearing it all the time, but with it playing throughout the song, it might be a little bit off. People might be wondering like why something sounds a bit weird. I can't talk. I can't put my thoughts into words right now. But pretty much, don't be afraid to experiment with EQ, and don't be afraid to take out a lot or to boost a lot. So let's get into panning, stereo, all that. So what I like to do with my panning is I like to take sounds that are similar and make them opposite of each other. So like snare 1, snare 2 here. Usually I'll take and pan this one to the left, other one to the right. And you want to do this part in stereo, because when you pan in mono, what happens is you really don't hear the difference. And same thing in mono. like with the stereo, it's gonna sound quieter if you put something into stereo when you're in mono. So keep that in mind. But I like to do this in, let me take all this off by the way too. I like to do this in stereo. So, like I said, I'll take equal sounds, pan them opposite of each other. And I like to keep my 808s kick right in the middle. So like my melody here, I won't take it too far away from the middle, but I'll take it off just a little bit. And I see this clap, I'm going to, I'll put it a little bit to the right, not too far though. The side snare, I'm gonna get that out there. This crash here, out there, away from the open hat, away, away. And that's just a very, very simple way of putting it. Same thing with panning. Don't be afraid of like zoom out. You can really like experiment with it. Like you can automate this so that like say the side snare would be like boom boom boom, like something like that. It was very shitty, but you know what I mean. Like you can really play with panning if you want. Now I forget what this was at. I have like such a shit memory. Alright, but yeah, so panning, same thing. Don't be afraid to experiment with it. Don't be afraid to really boost it out there. Like you can like make this way out there and this way out there, that way out there if you want. Or you can keep it pretty small, pretty close to the middle. It's up to you. Now the big thing, I forgot this one. The big thing with mixing is going to be stereo separation, because you can make stuff really wide and open up space for the other sounds. So what I like to do, 808s, any kind of low end sound, like a kick 808, a bass, I put a mono, because that's gonna compress all that, and strength is in mono, because it's compressing all the sounds. So your low end's really gonna hit in mono. So without mono, it hits a lot harder. Same thing with the kick. Kick not in mono, it hits a bit harder. So any kind of low end, put in mono, like complete mono. And then the rest of your sounds, melody, I like to separate that a little bit. It doesn't look like a crash. I can make it really wide. Clap, keep it a bit towards the middle. What sticks I was already put. Hi-hat, that can go out. And then stereo is just like, stereo is the same thing. Stereo is kind of, to you, what sounds good to your ear, but you will hear a difference with how stuff sits in the mix. It might not be an instant realization. It might take you a couple times, a couple mixes to finally start realizing that it sounds a bit different and that it sounds a bit more open. But stereo separation, just like everything else, it'll take time. Keep on working with it, and don't be afraid to experiment with it, just like everything else. But good rule of thumb is any kind of low end, make mono, like boom, mono, instantly. That's why I do it every mix. Instantly make any kind of low end mono. So like maybe that clap a little bit more. You know, it's really just up to you. Kind of like what sounds good to you will sound good to somebody else, hopefully. Unless you're like bass boosting the 808, like where it's like clipping. But your clipping can like clipping, same thing. It can sound good sometimes. And then some things I like to do. This is kind of like a mastering thing, which is gonna be the next video. Some things I like to do. I can't talk. Is put an EQ on the master track, and instantly take out anything underneath 20K and anything above 18K, and that's just so that those frequencies don't come into the mix, because human ears can't hear those frequencies underneath 20, under, and then above 18K. So FL Studio, actually, if you right click the presets, right arrow here, 20 hertz plus 18K hertz, boom, right there, has it for you already. I slap that on. That's the first thing I do in my master chain. And then I come into here. This is all going to be covered in the mastering video, which is going to be next week's video, by the way. What I like to do here, same thing as before. Listen for harsh sounds. So this is pretty boxy again. Take that out. See, that's pretty shrill. Take that out. That's really shrill. Take that out. That's very sharp. Take that out. And the way that you find these frequencies that are pretty tough or pretty like harsh on the ears is you want to make these very, very sharp, like a very pointed I don't know what the fuck that's called, waveform, pointed band. And what you want to do is go through, and then you really start to hear these sounds that you can hear the boxiness. If you go back down here, that's pretty, like, you can probably take that out if you want to. And all you do, you want to scrub through all the frequencies, and you'll find the frequency that don't sound good to your ears. Like, I missed a couple on this song, or this beat, which is okay, you know, shit happens. But that's what you want to do. You want to scrub, you find one you don't like, boom. You want to take out frequencies very pointed, very sharp, and you want to boost very wide. You don't want to boost like that. You want to boost pretty wide out. Those are a couple good rules to follow too. So let's do a quick little before and after. All I'm going to do is take out everything that we did today. So let me just take off EQs. And then just for making it easy, I'm going to keep the stereo separation as is, just so that we don't have to redo them. But take off all the EQs. And take off all the panning. So hear that? I can't talk. Here's how it sounds before. Let me just put these all back on really quick. I've got to take off the 808. God, this sucks ass. I probably could have just done these, honestly, but too late for that now. Okay, and let's get the... I'm just going to guess with the panning really quick. Here's how it sounds after. So same thing, pretty subtle, but does make the mix sound better at the very, very end, which the very end of mixing, to me, is mastering, which is going to be next week's video. So it's going to be about mastering, going to be about doing some small stuff to different sounds, like adding distortions, adding compressors, which compressors are very hard. I'm still kind of iffy with them, but I feel like I can show you and hopefully simplify it to you, because compressors are like the hardest fucking thing to learn, to me at least. So I'll show you all that. I'll show you how this little celly right here. Let me play that real quick. Oh shit. I'll show you how I made it sound like that. Here's how it sounded before. Very sharp. And then after, kind of like a distorted, like, oh shit, this is a nuke coming kind of sound. But yeah, so this could be next week's video. It's going to be mastering, going to be doing small stuff to your mix to finalize it. And then I'll show you pretty much what I like to do for the very end of a beat. I'll even show you how to export beats in case you really don't know how to export. And I'll show you how to send out stems, because stems are one of the things that are also like compressors. Nobody really gives you a straight answer until you learn it. And then you're like, oh shit, it makes sense now. So hopefully I could be the person to open your eyes up to that. But I'll show you all that next week. Hopefully you learned some shit out of this video. If you have any tips, if you saw something that I'm doing wrong, maybe I'm like really fucking up somewhere, let me know in the comments, and let us know in the comments your tips. Hope you liked this video. If you didn't see the first one, pretty important because that was the first step before this one. Link is in the bio, and there's probably going to be a little, little bubble thing popping up on the screen right now. If not, it's going to be at the end screen. So hopefully you guys like this video.